Alright guys, in this video I want to talk about the scene units and the unit scale in tyFlow Zenith. So I'm gonna start by creating the default omnipresent sphere that I always use. So I'm gonna pick it in the Inferno emitter, and this is how the default simulation looks like. So right now I'm viewing the units as meters, and I'm using 1 unit equals 1 meter. Now, tyFlow is gonna take care to automatically always create the same kind of default simulation, the same looking simulation, and it's gonna behave in the same way. So it's gonna set all of the internal parameters just in order for you to always get the same kind of simulation once you reset 3ds Max and once you view the default 3ds Max grid. So now you can see that the voxel size is 0.65 meters. So if I reset the scene, go here and change everything to centimeters, like this. If I create the sphere again, tyFlow again, just the sphere that looks roughly the same size as the previous one in the default grid. I'm gonna pick it, it's gonna start burning, and now it's gonna produce roughly the same kind of result. So it's gonna be a little different because the sphere it's not exactly the same size and it's in a different position. And here the voxel size, it was 0.65 meters before, so it was 65 centimeters. Now it's 0.65 centimeters, so it's 100 times lower, but the simulation is gonna look the same. tyFlow is gonna take care of changing all of the internal parameters so that you always get the same default simulation. And this is kind of like the toolbar presets in Phoenix. They always work this way as well, so that no matter how big or small your emitter geometry was, they were making sure that everything was looking and behaving the same way in the simulation, so that it would look like a small flame, so that it is going to look like a large explosion, it's going to look like a drop of water or an entire ocean. So right here, if I don't want to use this size, so if I like this behavior, but if I want to make it smaller, so if I just add a very small sphere like this, just delete this emitter, pick the sphere here, it's just gonna be a small emitter. So let me just go back. I'm gonna refresh it. Alright, so here was the previous simulation, and now if we go into the Inferno display, if I show the sparse cubes, here is the size of the sparse cube. So by default, it created a 2.5 million simulation at the end of the timeline. And this is not very high res, not very low res, so it has just enough detail so that it looks fine by default, but it's not using too much of your VRAM. It runs quickly and it doesn't run too slowly. So if I hide these sparse cubes, again, if I delete this, if I just pick the smaller emitter right here, it's just gonna create a small fire. It's still gonna use the same voxel size. And if I do the opposite, I'm gonna delete this emitter. Come on, emitter, get deleted. Right, and if I create a huge box like this, that just encompasses everything, and if I want to pick this as an emitter right now, I'm going to go and preemptively increase the voxel size right here to 10. Alright, so here is one sparse cube. It starts showing on the at the top of the box. I'm just gonna do this because if I don't, it's gonna use the same smaller voxel size and it's gonna use a ton of memory. I'm just probably gonna run out of memory. So I'm just gonna do this right at the beginning. I'm gonna pick it, and here it is. So now it simulates this box, and now that I know that it's not that bad, I can start reducing the voxel size in order to get more detail. Maybe reduce it even more, make it 3. Alright, so here it is, and it starts burning, but it's rising very slow because it's just so huge. So now the thing is that if you want to get the same behavior of the simulation, but just use a different scale in the viewport, in the 3ds Max scene. The one way to go is to just create a huge emitter or create a very small emitter, and then just go manually changing all of the other simulation settings so that you would match the WOOC. But there is a much easier way to do this. So if you let's reset, let's just create the default sphere, just make it easier to follow, just start from the beginning. So if I create this default setup like this, now the sphere starts burning, and now this sphere is 13 centimeters, almost 14. Yeah, almost 14 centimeters in radius, and if I measure it like using a box, it's 71 centimeters tall. So if I wanna have this simulation be larger but behave in the same way, let me just make it like the size of a human. So I'm gonna use this box and pretend that it's a human. So let's use the length of the human as 20 and make the human 50 centimeters wide and 180 tall, like this. So I wanna have this simulation, but I wanna make it as high as the human. Just pretend that this is the human size, and just make the simulation behave the same way but change the scale. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is, so if the human is 180, this was 70 centimeters, so if I double it, it's gonna be 140. If I triple it, it's gonna be 2 meters 10. So 2 meters 10 is gonna be closer, so I'm just gonna triple it. I'm gonna use a simple multiplier. I'm gonna make it 3 times larger. So now this is almost 14, double it is 20, 28, triple it, 42 centimeters in radius. If I increase this, now the emitter just gets bigger, but the simulation gets completely different. So now the easy way to change the scale of the simulation is to add an Inferno Scale operator like this. And right here is the scale. So I tripled the size of the emitter. I'm gonna triple the scale of the simulation like this. And now it's gonna start behaving like it was when it was on the lower scale. So this operator takes care to rescale all of the options here in the Inferno operators that need to change when you want to change the scale of the simulation. So now I could even bake the scaled values into the operators, and now I can disable this operator or even delete it, so that it doesn't clutter it anymore. And you can see now that it changed the voxel size, it changed the conservation radius, all of the options that are in world units are gonna change. It also changed the emission thickness, and here in the display mode, it changed the scene scale for the display, the temperature blur, what else? Like the distance of the ambient occlusion, all of the options that need to be changed, it took care of them so that you won't have to go and change everything manually. And the opposite, if you want to reduce the scale, so if you want to make it 10 times smaller, you could type 0.1 into the Inferno Scale, and it's going to preserve the behavior but change the size of the simulation in the viewport. So for example, in Phoenix, where you had the simulator box, you could just grab this box and scale it and rotate it. But if you do that, if you simulate again, you're going to get a very different simulation in the end. So you could do this only after you're sure that you're done simulating and you're never going to simulate again, because the simulator was actually also the container that took care of the rendering, and because by default Phoenix writes aura caches for each of the timeline frames. It didn't have RAM cache like Zenith, so you could do the same thing with Zenith as well. So you cannot scale the tyFlow, and it's not going to do anything. So you gotta use the Inferno Scale. But once you're done with the simulation, you could export it to VDBs using Export Inferno, and then load it in a container like the V-Ray volume grid, the R-node volume, and then you can start transforming this. And from this point on, it just becomes an asset that is going to be a part of the rendering. So this was the workflow if you want to keep the behavior but change the size of the simulation in the viewport. Now there is you can do the opposite thing. So you could want to keep the scale like keep the emitter scale, just keep all the surrounding geometry, everything interacting with the simulation, but just make the simulation act as if it was larger or smaller. So to do this, here in the Bird Inferno, under the advanced options, there is this option, simulation scale. And this one, it's the analog of what Phoenix had. It was called scene scale, I think. It was at the top of the dynamics rollout of the simulator. So this option cheats the solver into thinking that it's actually larger or smaller than it actually is. So if I have it, it's gonna make the simulation believe that it's twice smaller. So the fire is gonna start rising faster, like this, and it reaches new heights. And if I make it 10 times larger, then it's gonna start behaving as if this thing is actually huge. So it's gonna take a long time for the fire to rise. I'm actually even gonna lower this to 5, for example, like this. All right, so this is now gonna start behaving like a very large simulation, and it's gonna start burning very slowly. And now there is another thing, that all of these things that we are doing, so this is again, just to recap, using the Inferno Scale is the way to preserve the motion and the behavior of the simulation while we change its scale in the viewport. And with the simulation scale, you keep the scale in the viewport, but you change the behavior of the simulation on the other hand. However, both of these, they are taking the like the default simulation as a base. So you start off with the default Zenith simulation, and you can scale it up or down and tweak it this way. But if you want to have the simulation behave in real world scale, which was the default for Phoenix, you can go here, and the scale mostly affects the buoyancy, and which is the rate at which higher temperature rises. And also, if you use negative temperature, it's going to start falling down. And if we go here and change this to real world scale, now this is not going to change it too much because it's already near the real world scale, but it's going to adjust this just to have the regular gravity acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared. So if I go, let me just reset the entire scene, and now I'm gonna change the unit setup. So I'm gonna view it as meters and make one unit be 1 meter long. So I'm gonna create a sphere like this again. Add the Bird Inferno. If I pick the sphere like this, now I'm gonna get the default simulation, and now I'm gonna tell it to use the real world value. So now it's gonna start rising much slower. And on the previous scene, I had to go back and just reset the simulation scale because it was 5, so it was behaving like it was a lot larger. So now you can see that this fire starts rising even more slowly than before. So now this sphere is 13 meters in radius, and now the simulation behaves as if it was really 26 meters in diameter. So by the end of frame 100, it has risen just a couple of meters above. And if you remember the box-shaped human from the previous experiment, it was about 2 meters long, and at the end of frame 100, the flames reached that height. So now it's roughly proportional to that. And if I go and do the opposite, so now I'm gonna change the units to millimeters. So I'm gonna make the simulation very small by default. Again, just create the sphere, create a tyFlow, create the Bird Inferno, pick the sphere. Now we're gonna have the default simulation. And now I'm gonna change it to the real world value of the buoyancy. So now this sphere is gonna actually be very small. So now you can see that it just starts erupting. So this sphere is 18 millimeters in radius. So it's almost 2 centimeters. Let me just change the way that I view the units. So let me just view them as centimeters. Yeah, so it's almost 2. I'm not gonna change the size of the unit, I'm just gonna change how I view it. So it's almost 2 centimeters, so it's 3.6 in diameter. And hold on, did I type Q in the radius? Yeah. So now if I zoom out, here is how it looks. And if I just measure this again, here it is. So it's 66 centimeters tall. So this is gonna be the size of this. Yeah, let me just keep the sphere, keep the box here. So now it's gonna look like it's larger scale because of the simulation options. So for example, if I want to smooth it out, I'm gonna switch the advection from BFECC so that it doesn't create all of those small details. I'm just gonna smooth it out using backtrace advection, and I'm gonna zero the vorticity like this so that it doesn't curl so much. All right, and I'm also gonna decrease the smoke opacity like this, just make it more transparent. So this is gonna be the way that a very small flame, like originating from a sphere that is 3-4 centimeters large. So that's gonna be the behavior in real world units of such a flame, that it's gonna, by the end of frame 100, so in 3 seconds, it's gonna be 50 centimeters tall, very thin. And now the rest of this is just a matter of changing the simulation options in order to make this look like a proper small fire, just with the behavior of the simulation and also visually with the display. And also, if you want to have a very large explosion or something very, very large, again, in that case, using the BFECC advection or using PCG conservation and using a lot of vorticity, they are going to be the way to go to just get that look of a larger simulation like this. But this is the way that you would be able to make the simulation in real world scale, so that it's physically correct if you want to have it like this, and if you want it to like always behave in the same scale as the object around it. And for this, it's very important to have the emitter and all of the colliders in the right world scale. So also this is the default way that Phoenix behaved. So before we added the toolbar presets, this was how the simulation behaved, and there it wasn't very user-friendly because the default simulation, so if you just restart max and just view the default max grid and you just created a regular sized emitter, it was going to behave very differently based on your unit setup. So if one unit was very small, then the default 3ds Max grid is also going to be very small, and this is going to erupt. On the other hand, if you were using huge meters, so you could even use kilometers here, and then in that case, the simulation was going to be, on the contrary, is going to be very slow. And just your default simulation was going to behave differently depending on the unit scale. So now, in tyFlow Zenith, by default, this is not a problem anymore. It's always going to behave the same way. And in Phoenix, this was also built in the toolbar presets so that they were going to always behave properly depending on the size of the emitter. But if you want to change it to real world scale, you can use this this option right here. You can switch it manually. And this means that you know what you're doing and that you are ready to have your scene in the proper scale. All right, thanks guys for watching. I hope that this was useful, and yeah, if you ever feel forgotten or misunderstood, just remember that somewhere out there in the world there is a low poly sphere emitting density and temperature along its normals. Thanks guys for watching. See you in the next episode.